Ma, shall I start the class, ma?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in the last class, we spoke about, we had a detailed discussion about ADH. Okay. So we looked at the site of production, which is different from the site of release. We saw the chemistry of ADH or vasopressin. We saw its metabolism, its biosynthesis, its half-life. We also saw its physiological actions. In fact, it's because of its physiological actions that it is called as ADH or vasopressin, because it is causing the reabsorption of water and preventing diuresis. It is anti to diuresis, and it is also causing pressure action on the blood vessels, that's why it is called as vasopressin. Then we saw the receptors for ADH, how it is binding to the receptors. Various receptors are there, 3 types, and the second messengers involved. And then we looked at the applied aspects for ADH. What are the applied aspects for any hormone? Either the hormone is increased or it is decreased. So increased secretion of ADH, we call it as syndrome of inappropriate hypersecretion of ADH, SIADH. It is seen in cerebral diseases and lung disorders, mainly cancers. And the treatment for that is an antibiotic called as demiclocycline. Then we also saw the deficiency of ADH. Deficiency of ADH causes a condition called as diabetes insipidus. We quickly looked through the differences between diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus. And we saw that in diabetes insipidus, it is the absence of the facultative reabsorption of water. Where water is not reabsorbed, there is the passage of large volumes of urine, dilute urine. Whereas in diabetes mellitus, it is an osmotic diuresis where glucose in the renal tubules is causing the passage of large volumes of. And we also saw that diabetes insipidus is of 2 types. If there is a problem in the brain and the hormone is decreased, then it is called as central diabetes insipidus. If the problem is in the kidney, where in spite of the hormone being secreted, kidneys are not responding to ADH, then that is called as nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. And we saw the causes for central and nephrogenic. In nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, we saw that two problems can happen. Either the V2 receptor is abnormal or the aquaporin channel is abnormal also. Okay, either the V2 receptors are not responding or the aquaporin channels are abnormal. So that first one is an X-linked recessive and the second one is an autosomal disorder. And we saw that whatever may be the cause, whether it is central or nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, diabetes insipidus is characterized by polyuria and polydipsia. Okay, and the treatment for it is administration of a compound, a synthetic compound called as 1-D-amino 8-D-arginine vasopressin, also called as abbreviated as EDAVP or desmopressin. And common sense should be telling you that this is going to be useful mainly in the central diabetes insipidus. Nephrogenic, whether you give synthetic or whatever, it may not respond because the hormones are abnormal. For any compound or neurotransmitter or hormone tract, the receptors on the target cell must be normal. Okay, only then it is going to respond. Okay. So with this revision, we'll now move on to the next hormone which is secreted by the posterior pituitary, that is oxytocin. Oxytocin is also a nonapeptide. It is having 9 amino acids. Then if it is having 9 amino acids, Then number is same. It is the sequence of the amino acids which is different. So you can see the first one is vasopressin in this slide, whereas the second one is the oxytocin. And both are having 9 amino acids. Only thing is the type of composition of the amino acids is different. And there is a disulfide bridge here, right? And I hope you have all taken down this diagram. That is with regard to ADH. One diagram which tells us everything about ADH. Yeah. We also looked at the factors which regulate ADH secretion in yesterday's class, is it not? We had a detailed discussion. Oxytocin. Now, whenever the hormone oxytocin is asked, you can follow the same pattern. Okay, so you will say that it is synthesized in the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus, transported down the axons, the magnocellular axons. The endings are present in the posterior pituitary, and from there on, appropriate signal electrical activity, this is going to be released. And it is a peptide hormone, so you have pre-pro-oxytocin, which is converted into pro-oxytocin, and pro-oxytocin is stored in the granules along with, complete that sentence.
Neurophysin.
It is secreted along with neurophysin. Okay. So then this oxytocin, the question on oxytocin can be asked in another way also. Oxytocin can be also asked as neuroendocrine reflex. So why is it asked as neuroendocrine reflex?
Due to the somatic touch receptors that are present on the breast, it gets stimulated, and it sends impulses to the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei, which stimulate the hormone through the somatic touch pathway.
Any other reason you can think of? Your answer is not fully correct. Yes, we.
Yes, sir.
Tell me again, Datri.
It is a reflex, sir, in which the hormone forms the efferent lymph.
Okay. So what forms the afferent lymph? So for any reflex to be there, you need a reflex arc. Is it not? So what is like say for baroreceptor reflex? Which are the components of the reflex arc? How many components are there in the reflex arc?
5.
5 components. You have 5 components. You have referent, you have receptor, you have afferent, you have center, you have efferent, and you have the targets. Okay. So the way in which you can this question can be asked is the neuroendocrine reflex. So for the neuroendocrine reflex, you can very well say that there must be a reflex arc. For any reflex, there must be a reflex arc. So why this is called as a neuroendocrine reflex is that the afferent limb in the arc is neural, made up of nerve fibers, whereas the efferent limb is hormonal. Which hormone? Oxytocin. It's oxytocin. So both for the milk ejection reflex and the parturition reflex. The afferent limb is neural. The center is in the hypothalamus, the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus. And the efferent limb is the release of oxytocin. So that is why this is called as a neuroendocrine reflex. Okay, so please remember this word. Very, very, very frequently asked short notes or viva question. So oxytocin can be asked, the question on oxytocin can be asked in different ways. So they can just ask you name the posterior pituitary hormones and explain their functions. You have to write both ADH and oxytocin. Or They can ask oxytocin in an indirect way by telling neuroendocrine reflex. So you have to write about the milk ejection reflex, and you also have to write about the parturition. So you have to draw this diagram, and for this diagram, I'm not going to agree with that screenshot business. Okay, so you quickly take down this diagram quickly. So this is very important. Don't spend too much time trying to draw a cute image of a baby. Okay, so you can just draw like this, and you should not laugh. Just draw like this. And if you are still having time, you can put some eyes and nose for this. Hmm? And please put one smile. Hmm? Don't put sad faces here also. Huh? So మీకు ఓపిక ఉంటే you can put one eyes, nose, and not bad, no? Huh? చెప్పరేంటి సూపర్ కదమ్మా.
Yes, sir.
People are watching Ramayana and listening to the class. Finished? Done? Okay. So we'll break this up again into those five components, and we'll also start with the stimulus, right? So what is the stimulus for this? What is the stimulus for the milk ejection reflex? The baby suckling on the nipple.
Infant suckling.
Yeah, the baby or infant suckling on the nipple. Somebody can help me in this side. Yeah. So the baby or infant is suckling the nipple. That is a stimulus. So, what is the receptor for this reflex? What is the receptor? Receptor entama? The receptors are the touch receptors present in the areola of the nipple. Touch receptors present in and around the nipple, especially in the areola. What is the afferent limb of this? What is the afferent limb of the reflex arc? The somatic touch pathway. Somatic touch pathway from these touch receptors present in and around the nipple. That is the afferent limb. You can see that pathway, is it not? It is going from the nipple, it is going, entering into the spinal cord, and from there it is carrying the impulses. The diagram is not fully correct. It says paraventricular nucleus, but latest information tells that both supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus are secreting oxytocin and ADH. So please write SOP also here. Sorry, supraoptic SON. Write supraoptic nucleus here. So what is the center? What is the center? The paraventricular nucleus and supraoptic nucleus in the hypothalamus. These two are the center. That is the center. VVN. VVN and SON on the hypothalamus. Anybody can tell me which famous person has this initials as PVN?
Biochemistry HOD, sir.
Biochemistry HOD. Adi PVLN kadamma. Very famous in India. He is from Andhra.
PV Narasimha.
PV Narasimha.
I'm happy at least you are telling PV Narasimha Rao. PV Narasimha Rao, one of the best prime ministers of India, mainly because he identified Manmohan Singh. Okay, and it's a different story that Manmohan Singh was arguably, we don't know, the worst prime minister of India. That's a different story. But Manmohan Singh was probably one of the best finance ministers of India. Nobody can argue on that. He was identified by PV Narasimha Rao, and PV Narasimha Rao probably the best prime minister India has ever had. Whatever golden period, the economic changes, reforms, the good things that happen in the Indian economy were during PV Narasimha Rao's time. Most of what the other successive governments did was variations of what Manmohan Singh did. Manmohan Singh was identified by PV Narasimha Rao and brought back. Okay. Yeah, I'm not talking politics here. I'm just telling you about a very great personality from Andhra, which unfortunately the party which he belonged to fails to recognize him now. Anyway, right. We'll not go into politics. So, the stimulus is the infant suckling on the breast, which is going to stimulate the touch receptors in and around the nipple, especially in the areola. The afferents is the somatic touch pathway, which carries the sensations from these touch receptors in and around the nipple. The center is the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus in the hypothalamus, which project to neurons. These magnocellular neurons, magnocellular neurons from here project to posterior pituitary. So there is electrical activity is initiated in this magnocellular neurons, which causes the release of oxytocin into the bloodstream. Which causes the release of oxytocin into the bloodstream. So this is the efferent limb. The oxytocin is the efferent limb. You can write efferent limb as oxytocin. So you understood now? The afferent limb is the neural part, neural components, the somatic touch pathway. Whereas the efferent limb is the hormone oxytocin. That is why this is called as neuroendocrine reflex. Right? So what does oxytocin will do? What is the target cell or effector organ for the oxytocin?
Muscles of the breast, it causes contraction.
Ruhi, you had your breakfast.
Yes, sir.
You speak loudly then.
It causes contraction of the breast muscles.
Causes
And milk is
contraction
ejected into
of
the
the
stomach.
breast muscle. Anybody else? The answer,
It helps in
the answer
shape.
is like our typical Pancha Pandavalu Entamandi. How many are there, Pandavas? And I'm doing this.
Myoepithelial.
The
Myoepithelial
of
target
myoepithelial
cell, the target cell is the myoepithelial cell. This is very important. They will look for this word in your answer. They will look for this word in your answer. Myoepithelial cells. These myoepithelial cells are present around the ductal tissues, sinuses and ductal tissue in the breast. So when these myoepithelial cells are going to contract, the milk is going to be ejected out of the nipple into the mouth of the infant who is suckling. Okay, so this reflex is called as the milk ejection reflex. And people say it is not only that in the milk is ejected out from the breast on which the baby is suckling. The opposite breast also some amount of milk is coming out. Okay, and not only in a postpartum woman, not only is the stimulus suckling by the infant, even genital stimulation, emotions can also cause oxytocin release, which can in turn cause this milk ejection. Okay. So there it's not just one stimulus. You can also have the milk ejection reflex stimulus, not only the baby suckling, but genital stimulation and emotions. So that can also cause the milk ejection reflex to happen. So this is a very frequently asked question. Very, very frequently asked question in postpartum women. Means what do you mean by postpartum? After delivery. After delivery in women, you see this reflex. And because you have one limb neural and the other limb as hormonal, this is called as neuroendocrine reflex. Right? Understood? So, what is the other neuroendocrine reflex? The other neuroendocrine reflex is the parturition. What do you mean by parturition? What do you mean by parturition?
Delivery.
of the
This is by which the baby is delivered is called as parturition. I think the other one is better. Yeah, this is the structure of the breast. So the myoepithelial cells are present around these ducts and sinuses. And that is going to cause the milk to be ejected. And I think this is the better one. Have you taken down those diagrams? I have posted the PDF file. Okay. Right. The other reflex is the parturition reflex. The parturition reflex is also a neuroendocrine reflex. So parturition is the process of delivery of the baby and products of conception. What do you understand by products of conception?
Placenta.
Placenta has to be delivered. If the placenta, even a small bit of it is left behind, it's going to be a big disaster. Big disaster. Okay. It happened to one of my close friends in Nellore. His wife underwent the cesarean section. The doctor was her close friend. Very quickly, she was in a hurry. She was going to her native place. Very quickly, she has done it. She usually does the operation with when her husband is present. Surgeon, he was not there. They did it in a hurry. After 1 week, she had such a torrential bleeding. They panicked, and obviously he called me, and by the time they had rushed her to the hospital, and then again they have had to take her to the operation theater, and then under the anesthesia they had to remove whatever the bits of placenta which were left. So this is called a secondary hemorrhage. Very dangerous thing which will happen if the doctor is negligent and not ensuring that whatever products, bits of placenta or other thing are removed or delivered. Okay, so please keep that in mind, right? Anyway, so this this parturition reflex. This is also a neuroendocrine reflex. So again, we can follow the same pattern. So we can break it up as the stimulus for this reflex, and then the receptor, the afferent, center, efferent, and target. Okay. So the receptor is the stretch receptors which are present in the cervix, right? So I don't know whether the anatomy of the uterus has been done. The uterus can be divided, especially after pregnancy, into two distinct parts. One is the lower part, which is called as the cervix, and the upper part, which is called as the body or fundus. Okay, so this till the time of delivery, the cervix is closed tightly. Okay, so only at the time of delivery, once the total duration of pregnancy is completed, so then what happens is oxytocin receptors in the uterus increase. Prostaglandin secretion will increase. Oxytocin receptors will increase. Lot of estrogen is secreted. Estrogen will prime the uterus so that oxytocin can come and act. So combination of factors are happening. Okay. So I'll just throw one question at you all. Why the delivery does not happen before in a normal person? Why it happens only in full term? What do you mean by full term? What is the total duration of pregnancy? And why till full term, that time, the process of delivery is not happening? So please read up and tell me tomorrow, or you can WhatsApp me also. Better you tell me tomorrow. Okay. I'll leave you with this question. Anyway, so in a full term baby, normal delivery, yeah, where we are seeing normal deliveries nowadays, that's a different story. Anyway, so what happens is the head of the baby is descending down into the cervix. Okay. So when the head of the baby descends down into the cervix, what happens? The cervix stretches. So when the cervix stretches, the stretch receptors in the cervix are activated, and again by the somatic pathway, the impulses are carried to the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus in the hypothalamus, magnocellular neurons. So electrical activity starts in these neurons, a burst of electrical activity. They are projecting to posterior pituitary. So from the posterior pituitary, the oxytocin is released into the bloodstream. The oxytocin travels into the blood and reaches the uterus, and so many receptors are there. All are primed, ready, waiting for oxytocin. When oxytocin comes and binds here, it will cause a strong contraction of the fundus. So in the fundus, this part is called as the upper part is called as the fundus. This part. Okay. So when the fundus contracts, this will push the baby down. This is going to push the baby down into the cervix. So what happens when more of the head is descending down into the cervix? More stretch. More stretch, more impulses are going to the hypothalamus, more release of oxytocin. Oxytocin comes and acts on the fundus, and then this cycle repeats over and over again, and it is terminated only when the baby and the products of conception are delivered. Both neuroendocrine reflexes are examples of dash reflexes. Are examples of dash.
Positive
Yeah,
feedback
very good.
mechanism.
They are examples of positive feedback mechanisms. So stretch, oxytocin release. Oxytocin causes contraction of the uterus. Uterus will contract strongly, push the head down, more stretch of the cervix, more impulses, more oxytocin, more contraction, descent, more descent. So you can see that the steps written there. This cycle repeats over and over again, and it is terminated only when the baby and the products of conception are delivered. And again, I stress, many of you in future are going to be obstetricians in the OBG department. Hopefully you'll do that. And when you're doing the delivery, please make sure that everything has been delivered. There is nothing retained back in the uterus. So what is the role of oxytocin in males? In males, oxytocin will cause... Shall I start the class? Please raise your hands if I can start the class. Okay, so we started our discussion on the second of the two hormones, that is oxytocin, which is released by the posterior pituitary, that is oxytocin. And we saw that the best way to remember the actions of oxytocin is to remember it as neuroendocrine reflexes. So neuroendocrine reflexes both are in women. One is at the time of parturition, which is called as the parturition. Right? The other is after parturition, is in postpartum mothers who are breastfeeding their babies. So that is called as the milk ejection reflex. And we had a detailed discussion and we saw why these two reflexes are called as neuroendocrine reflexes. Okay. So you can remember the functions of oxytocin in like this. You can say functions in females. Okay. So in females again you can divide it as in pregnancy, at the time of delivery, and in postpartum women. Okay. And in non-pregnant women, we see that this oxytocin is released at the time of sexual intercourse, and it may cause the uterine contractions, which helps in the movement of the sperm to the fallopian tube. Where does the fertilization takes place?
Ampillary
Ambulatory region of fallopian tube.
Most often, the fertilization takes place in the middle one-third of the fallopian tube. The most common site. It can take place anywhere. That's a different story. But in a series of studies, they saw that the fertilization takes place in the middle of the fallopian tube. So the sperm has to travel from the vagina. It has to enter into the cervical canal. It has to go via the cavity, uterine cavity, and it has to go into the fallopian tube. So the sperm has to be motile, and some say that there are contractions in the uterus at the time of sexual intercourse in females, which helps in the motility of the sperm. And the reason for this uterine contraction is the release of oxytocin. Okay, so that is one way you can remember the functions of oxytocin. So in pregnancy, at the time of delivery and after delivery, if the mother is breastfeeding her baby, it helps in this milk ejection reflex. At the time of delivery, the parturition reflex. And in non-pregnant women, at the time of sexual intercourse, it is released. It causes the uterine contraction, which probably, there is a question mark here again, it probably aids in the movement of the sperm so that it can reach to the fallopian tube, where usually the process of fertilization takes place. Okay. And in males, after puberty, we see that the oxytocin causes contraction of the vas deferens at the time of ejaculation, and which acts as an added factor which helps in propelling the sperm out of the penis. Okay, so propelling the sperm and the semen out of the penis. So that is the function of oxytocin in males and in females. Right? So you already know that there is one synthetic form of vasopressin. What is that called as? Desmopressin. When do we use that desmopressin?
In central diabetes insipidus.
In diabetes insipidus. Okay. And most often we see that it is useful mainly in central diabetes insipidus. Sometimes it may work in diabetes insipidus. But just like there is a synthetic form of vasopressin, there is a synthetic form of oxytocin, syntocinon, SYNTOCINON, syntocinon. But this has to be given intravenous as a slow drip. Intravenously via the veins, it has to be given via like a slow drip. It has to be given synthetic oxytocin, which is called as syntocinon. So when the full term has reached, but still the process of labor has not, labor or delivery or parturition all mean the same thing, that has not started, then they give this syntocinon drip. And depending on the body weight, slow drip is given so that the process of this parturition is started. Okay. So with this, we finish our discussion on posterior pituitary hormones, right? And if the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal tract is cut, for some time you may not have the posterior pituitary hormones. But after some time, we do see that the nerve endings, which neurons they are? What do you call those neurons?
Magnocellular.
Yeah, so these magnocellular neurons, nerve endings may sometimes regrow and make connections with blood vessels and then start secreting the hormone. So if only the nerve endings up to a certain length is cut, after some time you do get ADH and oxytocin being secreted. But the problem is that the site of synthesis of the hormone is damaged. What is the site of synthesis of the hormone? Cell body. In the nucleus, the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus, the actual synthesis takes place. So then there is going to be a major problem. Yeah. Right. So with this, we'll move on to the next thing. I thought we'll go through this study questions. Okay, study questions is a nice way of, kind of revising our knowledge and seeing how much we know, and they also help us to think. That is most important, is it not? So just you can look at the first question and tell me the answer.
A.
Yeah, the answer is A. So we see that in the kidneys, it binds to the V2 receptor, which is coupled to a G protein, and that will cause phosphorylation of protein production of. What is the second messenger here? That they have skipped because answer the question becomes very long. That leads to increased production of cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP will cause phosphorylation of protein kinase A, which in turn will cause phosphorylation of the aquaporin. Preformed pool of aquaporin is there. Then that will get inserted into the which membrane? Basolateral membrane or luminal membrane? Okay. Okay. What is the second? What is the answer to the second question?
B.
Second option B.
Huh?
B.
In this slide, he says fluid loss due to hemorrhage, vomiting, diarrhea. Anything else which can cause fluid loss? Something else which can cause fluid loss. Huh? Excessive sweating. This summer, be very careful. Okay. So excessive sweating. What is the temperature in the north? Who will tell me what is the temperature in Delhi or Rajasthan? Hello. What is the temperature in Delhi? Sorry? Huh? How much more? 37. You know what was the temperature yesterday and day before yesterday in Tirupati? 46. It was 46, 10 degrees more. Huh? Anyway, so the answer, now you tell me what is the answer to the second one.
D.
Second option.
D.
D, sir.
ఏమైంది మీరందరికి ఈరోజు చెప్పు ఏబిసిడి 4 ఉన్నాయి చెప్తా ఉండే ఏదో ఒకటి తగులుతుంది. See this graph nicely. What does it say here? What does it say here? What does it say here?
When plasma osmolarity
10%
falls
blood
below
loss.
270.
And the blood volume is decreasing by 10%. That is also going to cause an increase in the ADH secretion. Okay. So now we'll come back to the question. Yeah, I just posted it on the group. You also didn't bother to read it. Took a screenshot and I posted it in the group. Now tell me the answer. I think somebody here told it. Huh? What is the answer, ma? It is C, no. Only after more than a 10% decrease in blood volume. See, that is the one. See, when a person starts sweating and starts losing fluid, can the plasma osmolality decrease to 270 milliosmoles? Normal plasma osmolality is around 285 milliosmoles. So if the person is losing only fluid, it should become hyperosmotic. So that is right. So it is released immediately following stimulation of thirst. No. If you see the graph, first, when the blood volume decreases, that is a more potent stimulus for ADH to be released. Volume overrides tonicity. Then what is remaining now? Only after more than a 10% decrease in blood volume. Okay. So third one. Huh?
D.
The only option is correct one is D. So when there is a syndrome of inappropriate hypersecretion is missing in the question. Syndrome of inappropriate hypersecretion of ADH, SIADH. So there is dilutional hyponatremia. A large volume of dilute urine is also going to be excreted out. Even though a lot of sodium is being excreted out, it is not going to increase the urine osmolarity because water is much more. Water is much more, so that is going to cause hyponatremia with low urine osmolarity. Then next one, fourth one. The correct one is it is produced in the magnocellular neurons of the hypothalamus, where the cell body of this magnocellular neurons is present in the hypothalamus.
Supraoptic and paraventricular.
Yeah, supraoptic and paraventricular. And it is synthesized there. And how it is going to the posterior pituitary?
Hypothalamus.
Yeah, what is the process by which it is traveling?
Exoplasmic.
Yeah, exoplasmic flow. So there is a exoplasmic flow, and then it reaches the ending. Okay, last one.
D, sir.
Huh? Yeah, the only answer is D. Okay. It is not altered throughout pregnancy is false because progesterone inhibits oxytocin response to the receptors. So I gave one question to you all, is it not? Why only at the time of the delivery, the process at the time at full term, the process of delivery is happening? Why? What keeps it in check? Okay, so just read up that, you'll understand. So it is enhanced by increased oxytocin receptor density. And please remember, it is in that reflex, the parturition reflex, we were talking about systemic oxytocin. Means oxytocin released from the posterior pituitary, entering into the circulation and coming to the uterus. But there is also locally produced oxytocin also. Uterus can produce oxytocin on its own. That is also an important point to be considered. Okay. So we'll move on to the next topic, that is the anterior pituitary. So before I actually start the discussion on anterior pituitary, very briefly, already we have been talking throughout, very briefly I'll just run through the embryology and the little bit about the anatomy of the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland, it arises from two structures: the anterior pituitary and the intermediate lobe of the pituitary. They arise from the evagination of the floor of the pharynx. What is that evagination called as? It's called as the rat cage. Yeah, rat cage pouch. Okay. And then you also have the downward growth from the third ventricle. That part forms the posterior lobe. So these two will merge, and then you get the final pituitary gland. And in between these two, the dorsal part is going to form the intermediate lobe. We have a remnant here called as the cleft. Yeah. You can see the names: the pars tubralis, anterior lobe. What is the other name for the anterior lobe?
Adenohypophysis.
Other name for the posterior lobe? The posterior lobe.
Neurohypophysis.
Neurohypophysis. Anatomy అనగానే ఉత్సాహంగా వస్తాయండి ఆన్సర్స్. So then this we know. Okay, this we have been reading so many times. What is this neuron called as? Oh God. The parvocellular. The other one, the short one is the parvocellular neuron. This is the magnocellular neuron. Okay. If you look at the intermediate lobe of the pituitary gland, if you look at the histology of the pituitary gland, you will see that in the posterior pituitary you have nerve endings on a blood vessel, and you have few cells called as pituocytes. In the intermediate lobe, you have some cells, not very well distinguished. In the anterior pituitary, you have interlacing cords of cells and the sinusoidal capillaries. And the cells in the anterior lobe, based on their staining properties, they are previously they were classified as, depending on whether they take up the stain, how they were classified. Anterior lobe cells on histology. Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were.
Acidophilic and basophilic.
Chromophobic and chromophilic. So those cells which took up a stain, they were called as chromophilic. Philia means love. Okay. So those stains which took up those cells which took up the stain, they were called as chromophilic. And those cells which did not take up the stain, they were called as chromophobic. Okay. And the chromophilic cells were again subdivided into two types, depending on which stain they were taking. So those which took up the acidic stain were called as acidophils, and those which took up the basic stain were called as basophilic cells. Okay, and traditionally we used to teach that the acidophilic cells are the ones which secrete growth hormone and prolactin, Whereas all the other hormones, TSH, FSH, LH, and ACTH are secreted by the basophilic cells. This is what we have been teaching, but almost 25 years back, 30 years back, this concept changed. There is one special technique which was invented called as immunohistochemistry. ఒకసారి అందరూ చెప్పండి. Immunohistochemistry. All of you just tell it once.
Immunohistochemistry.
Immunohistochemistry. Okay. So you are using special antibodies to stain cells. Fluorescent antibodies you are using to stain cells. Okay. So you can use fluorescent antibodies against growth hormone. And those cells which stained with this fluorescent antibodies against growth hormones, they concluded that they are the ones which are secreting growth hormone. They were called as somatotropes, TROPES. The hormones which secrete the cells on immunohistochemistry, fluorescent they use that technique. Don't bother about the technique. They concluded that there are specific cells which are going to secrete growth hormone and also prolactin. So they call them as somatotropes. Some people call them as somatomamotropes because they also secrete prolactin. Okay. So based on that, they saw that there are five cells in the anterior pituitary. These somatomamotropes or somatotropes which secrete growth hormone and prolactin. So can you guess on the same, using the same logic or common sense, what are the other four types of cells? Yeah,
Corticotrophs.
corticotropes, CROTICO, CROTICOTROPES, corticotropes. So what do these corticotropes secrete?
ACTH.
Adenocort.
Adrenocorticotropic hormone, and also one more hormone called as beta lipotropic hormone, beta LPH, beta lipotropic hormone. Okay, so that is the corticotropes. So what is the next cell?
Gonadotropes.
Very good. Gonadotropes. Gonadotropes are the cells which secrete. Yeah, gonadotropes are the cells which secrete gonadotropic hormones, FSH and LH. So what is the next cell?
Thyrotropes.
Thyrotropes. Thyrotropes are the cells which are going to secrete thyroid stimulating hormone. And I told you that controversy is there. Some told the same cell, but now they tell no, another cell is there which secretes, what is the remaining hormone?
Lactotropes.
Prolactin. Okay, so lactotropes. There is one cell called as lactotropes, and the lactotropes are the ones which secrete the prolactin. Okay, so old way of classification is as chromophobes, chromophils. Chromophils again separated into acidophils and basophils. Acidophils secrete growth hormone and prolactin. Basophils secrete the other one, FSH, LH, ACTH, and TSH. Now, not now, long back, almost 30, even in swims, we have immunohistochemistry. I was speaking to the pathologist, old one, Dr. Radhika, she was telling we had it. We did that way back in 92, 93, she was telling they used to do this immunohistochemistry, they started. So we have a full-fledged immunohistochemistry lab in swims. So based on immunohistochemistry, we saw that there are five types of cells. Somatotropes, which secrete growth hormone, corticotropes, which secrete ACTH, thyrotropes, which secrete thyroid stimulating hormone, and gonadotropes, which secrete both FSH and LH, and lactotropes, which secrete prolactin. Okay. So then if you look at the intermediate lobe of the pituitary will secrete melanocyte stimulating hormones. Yeah, alpha and beta melanocyte stimulating hormones. But in adults, they say that this intermediate lobe of the pituitary is becoming rudimentary. So again, there is a controversy like this, like that. There is one big molecule called as POMC. There is one big molecule called as POMC. Can anybody tell me the full form?
Pyomelanocortin.
Can you tell me again, Ruhi? Only Ruhi.
Pyomelanocortin.
Huh?
Pyomelanocortin.
No. Anybody else? Roll number 161, 142.
Para-melanin.
Anybody here? Anybody here?
Pro-opiomelanocortin.
ఏమి చూసావా నెట్ లో చూడలేదా? Okay, I was just joking. Doesn't matter even if you looked it up. Doesn't matter. Pro-opiomelanocortin. Exam lo చూడకూడదు. University exam lo anta చూడకూడదు. Internals lo. Anyway, so there is this compound POMC is called as pro-opiomelanocortin. This pro-opiomelanocortin in anterior lobe it is processed differently. In the intermediate lobe it is processed differently. Okay. Say for example, in the anterior lobe of the pituitary, this POMC is processed to get ACTH, beta lipotropic hormone, and beta endorphin. Whereas in the intermediate lobe, it is processed differently. The breakage, post-translational modification is done differently. So you get corticotrophin-like intermediate peptide clip. It is called as alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, beta melanocyte stimulating hormone, and beta endorphins. Anyway, point to remember, if you don't remember the hormones, doesn't matter. Anterior lobe, you remember POMC is processed to get ACTH, beta lipotropic hormone, and beta endorphin. Point to be remembered is from the same precursor molecule, you can get different products. Okay, from the same precursor molecule, big protein is there. How that protein molecule is broken down? In the anterior lobe, it is broken down in one way. In the intermediate lobe, it is broken down in another. If you remember that concept, even if you are not able to understand that concept, just remember by heart the hormones. Okay, so POMC, anterior lobe, ACTH, beta lipotropic hormone, beta endorphins. POMC, intermediate lobe, CLIP, one hormone called as CLIP CLIP, alpha beta melanocyte stimulating hormone, and beta endorphin. Okay? Then you have a 2-unit structure of some hormones. I already discussed this. Can you tell me which hormones have this 2-unit structure?
FSH, TSH, HCG.
Yeah, 3 hormones: TSH, FSH, LH from the anterior pituitary, and one more hormone from the placenta, that is HCG. These 4 hormones are having this 2-unit structure. So what is that 2-unit structure? They have 2 subunits, alpha subunit and beta subunit. They have these 2 subunits. They are polypeptides made up of the alpha and beta subunits. Okay. So TSH, FSH, LH, and HCG. And same. The alpha subunit is same. In all the 4 hormones, the alpha subunit is same. The amino acid number, the sequence of the amino acids is same. The glycoprotein content changes. The carbohydrate content, sorry, not the glycoprotein, the carbohydrate content changes. Okay. So if you take alpha subunit from one and add it to the beta subunit of the other one, it will become another hormone. It will become like start behaving like the other hormone. Say from TSH, you take alpha subunit and the beta subunit from HCG. When you combine these two, then you are getting a hormone which will behave like HCG. So, which is more important? Which is giving the specific hormonal action? The alpha subunit is giving the specific hormonal action, or it is the beta subunit which is giving the specific hormonal action? Common sense question.
Beta subunit.
Beta
Beta
subunit.
subunit.
Beta subunit.
Beta subunit.
The beta subunit which is giving the specific function. Okay. Then I'll start with the anterior lobe maybe tomorrow or on Thursday. I'll quickly finish about the intermediate lobe. Right? Skin color. Very controversial topic we are discussing. Skin color, which has caused so much problems in the world throughout. Okay. So the skin color depends on the amount of melanin in humans. The skin color depends on the amount of melanin. Melanin is produced by cells called as melanocytes. So these melanocytes have sent multiple processes. The processes will secrete this melanin, and then it is transported up in the skin, and it comes and stays in the keratinocytes and the cells. Keratinocytes, yeah, it comes and it stays in the cells, and if more melanin is there, it going to give a dark color. In lower animals like say reptiles, fish, and some lizards, this skin color helps them to survive as camouflage, the behaviors, mating, and all that. It helps. There it is different. We have some granules called as melanophores in their cells. If they are all around the nucleus, their skin color lightens. If they spread out and go towards the periphery, their skin color dark. In humans, it is different. Melanocytes, if they secrete more of melanin, and that melanin is coming to the upper layer of the skin and gets deposited there, skin color darkens. So what is the key question now? The key question now is what controls these melanocytes? The melanocytes are controlled, stimulated by alpha and beta melanocyte stimulating hormone. But there is a controversy in that in the humans, the intermediate lobe is most often rudimentary. So we may not have alpha and beta melanocyte stimulating hormone. ACTH has melanocyte stimulating hormone, which is synthesized from the anterior pituitary, and that can cause the skin color to darken. Okay. So in hypopituitarism, what do you mean by hypopituitarism? The entire pituitary gland function has decreased. So there is no secretion of anterior and posterior pituitary hormones. Many things will happen. One of the things which is observed is the skin color lightens, and it is probably because of decrease in ACTH secretion. So you look at the other condition, other thing, in a condition called as Addison's disease. Can anybody tell me what is Addison's disease quickly? Yeah, decreased levels of cortisol. Yeah, cortisol is decreased. So if the problem is in the adrenal gland, lot of ACTH will be secreted. Okay, and that ACTH secretion will cause skin pigmentation. So one of the things you should suspect in patients with abnormal skin pigmentation is Addison's disease, because in primary Addison's disease means there is no problem in the hypothalamus, there is no problem in the anterior pituitary, the adrenal gland itself is abnormal, it is not secreting ACTH, that will cause abnormal skin pigmentation. Please read up about albinism, piebaldism, and vitiligo and tell me tomorrow. Albinos, what is albinism?